What is up, listeners of the Didn't Ask podcast? Welcome back to episode 38 of the Didn't Ask podcast. Hopefully, you have had a good week. Welcome back to the podcast, or welcome if this is your first time listening to the Didn't Ask podcast, a Reddit podcast where I, Djimon, dive into the world of Reddit to see what the people asked Reddit and didn't ask me. Hopefully, you had a good week. I certainly did. It was a pretty chill weekend. There were no major sports events, no Formula One, no UFC, no WWE. So it meant that it was a pretty chill weekend, and it was just a weekend for me to re energize, sleep a little longer than I would normally do, and just, run some errands and do that and the other thing. But yeah, there's not much to talk about. So let's just jump right into the first question coming from the Ask Reddit subreddit. And this one posted by user I underscore love underscore small underscore breasts. Should have read that before I read that out loud. What are you in the top 1% of? So I saw this question and it set me thinking, like, what am I in the 1% of? Because it's certainly not money and certainly not working experience and stuff like that. And then I was thinking, hey, I was in the 1% of my graduation of high school. So in high school, you do your things, you get your exams and whatnot. And then you get your graduation diploma. So they did this whole event in our school gym where they had this whole presentation prepared for all the people, that were there, and it were multiple classes, like multiple groups of people together. And somehow my name was on 3 separate slides, and that was, I believe I had the highest grade for a class going into the exams, and then I had the highest grade of the exams, and then I had the highest grade for my profile presentation, as they would say that. So in all forms, like I got mentioned 3 times, and they were just like, the first time everybody was like, oh yeah, cool, Djimon, yay. And then the second time was like, oh wow, another one, cool, yay. And then the third time everybody was like, what the fuck did this kid do to be on 3 separate slides to get his name mentioned at the fucking diploma ceremony? And it was so funny to me that the third time I showed up, I was just laughing and I didn't even know what to say anymore, because like when you see stuff like that, you always have a reaction. You go like, yeah, or ooh, that's cool, or I wasn't expecting that. But then when the third time hit, I was just laughing because I just didn't know what to do. I was like, okay, this is weird. I didn't really do well in my exams and in the last year of school. Like the exams fucked my grades over. It was really sad because I went in with pretty high grades, and then the exams I just fluffed most of them, sadly. So my grades were very low, and it was very sad because, of course, that minimizes the opportunities you have to go to college and universities and stuff like that. But luckily, the university I went to or wanted to go to at that time didn't have that many high standards. So I was pretty good for that. But yeah, it was really funny to see myself on 3 separate slides during the diploma ceremony. Just be up there with highest grades of that year. And it's so fucking weird to me that I was one of them, especially because I fluffed my exam so badly. And going back to the question asked by user I underscore love underscore small underscore breasts, what are you in the 1% of? And for me, that would be, the diploma thing. But most people in this Reddit took a way different turn. Like I was just like, oh, this is gonna be fun. And people are talking about surviving flesh-eating bacterias and surviving cancer multiple times, and that shit is fucking crazy. So my story won't tip to that point, but I think that mine is a little in higher fates or something like that. Thank you for your question. I love small breasts. Moving on to the second question, asked by user Doctor underscore disaster, and they ask, "What is something that you have purchased in the past but have never used once since then?" As a gamer, and I think that most gamers know this, you just buy games. You think like, "Oh, that game looks cool," and then you buy it. And then you realize like, "Oh, I have a backlog of X amount of games that I've never touched." And these games just keep stacking. Like I feel like at this point I have hit a total amount of games on my Steam list that is about 150 titles long, and I legitimately think I've only played maybe 10% of that. Maybe. Like most of them I have never touched. Some of them I've never even installed on my PC to begin with. So that would probably be my answer. It's just games. Again, like I said, my Steam list is super long and I've never touched most of them. Again, like I said, not some of them not even downloaded, some of them downloaded but never played. And this goes on my PlayStation because I have games on my PlayStation that I've purchased years ago at this point that I was very much intended on playing but never actually did. So that would be my answer to you and your question, Doctor underscore disaster. What is something that you have purchased in the past but have never used once since? And it's probably the hundreds of games that I have in my Steam library, that I have in my Epic Games account, that I have on my PlayStation. Not so much on my Xbox because I don't really play on my Xbox. I don't even have an Xbox anymore. And before that, I didn't really buy that many games for my Xbox unless I was actually intending on playing them. But now, yeah, there are just things that I've bought and on all these platforms that I've bought but never actually touched or even installed. So I should do better, but it is what it is. Thank you for your question, Dr. underscore disaster. Moving on to the third question for today, asked by user Njana, and they ask, "You are given immortality with the side effect of being sent back in time 2,000 years. Would you accept this offer, and if so, what would you do?" Personally, I wouldn't take immortality. There are always these questions or like hypothesis of like what would a human do when they can live forever? But to me, it's just like, why the fuck would I want to live forever? Living forever seems horrible. It seems absolutely deplorable. And other than that, you also have to deal with certain things like living for eternity is already like a thing that you need to deal with. But then you also need to deal with the fact that I presume that you have all the knowledge that you have now. You would have back then. And then it's just like, okay, well, can I mingle in this? Because that's going to make me a fucking genius. But that also means that other people won't have the ability. And I'm going to change the course of history for sure. And that's certainly not what we want. And Marvel just released the movie The Eternals or Eternals not that long ago. And in that movie, there are also some pros and cons to living for eternity. Like the name implies, the Eternals are here for eternity, and they have some things that you wouldn't think of because hey, if you live for thousands of years and you live for eternity, that means that your brain is gonna hit a point where it's not even gonna remember certain things, and it might even make you go crazy. In the movie, of course, it's because of a bigger story that's in play, but I still think that there are some things there that I could understand that a normal brain, a normal human brain, is basically capable of storing memories for, let's say, 100 years. And of course, we have dementia and shit like that that make people forget that stuff. But there's gonna be a point where your brain just doesn't fucking compute that shit anymore. And you're gonna just go absolutely outrageously mad. And then we have the fact that you will never be with your love forever because you are presumably the only one that is able to live for eternity. So then you find somebody you love and that you have a connection with, but you know up front that you're gonna outlive this person for many hundreds of years, thousands of years, eternity. So now I'm have to deal with losing my loved one every somewhat years and me just staying the same. And then what am I going to do? Am I going to live in a fucking cave? Because I live for eternity, which means that everybody sees that I can live for a very long time and they gonna either treat me like a god or they are gonna treat me like the devil. And that sounds fucking horrible. So going back to the question asked by user Njana, you are given immortality with side effect of being sent back in time 2000 years. Would you accept this offer? And if so, what would you do? No, I wouldn't accept this offer. I feel like life is meaningful because there is an end to it. Having to live for eternity makes life so much more meaningless to begin with. And then you have to deal with all the consequences of not only your actions but just like the whole world, because the whole world is moving on around you and you're basically standing still because you live there for eternity. So you can never, I mean, if you marry somebody to death turns us apart, of whatever the fuck the saying is, that is very much true, but mostly because the person you love is probably gonna die in 20 years or 50 years, name a fucking number, while you keep living on, and then you have to deal with that, and then that keeps on happening. That keeps on happening, keeps on happening. And at a certain point, you just cannot emotionally hold that. So yeah, I wouldn't take immortality, and especially not if I'm gonna get sent back 2000 years in the past, because that's just gonna fuck my whole life up. It sucks. I don't want to do this. So thank you for your question, but no, I'm not gonna do that, Njana. Going on to the fourth question of today, posted by user MegaChamps, and they ask, what is your opinion on cheating in single player games? I personally don't mind cheating in single player games. I do it sometimes, and it depends, of course, what the game is, but it's a single player game. What the fuck do I care if somebody else is cheating? I was thinking about this not that long ago because the new Pokemon came out, or at least the remake of the old Pokemon. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl came out 2 weeks ago at this time. And what I was thinking about is the way I played the games when I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I had the game on like one of those R4 cards that you could put in your DS. And with that, you could add cheat codes. And one of those or a couple of those cheat codes were you can max out your master balls so you can spawn in the game with 1,000,000 master balls. And if you know Pokemon, you know that a master ball is basically the guaranteed I'm gonna catch this Pokeball. You can throw that Pokeball at a Pokemon that's full health. You don't have to attack them, and the ball will 100% close. So that makes the game already 10 times easier because you now don't even have to fight Pokemon, you can just catch them. But to add a more interesting wrinkle to this, you could add a mod in like the cheat codes menu that makes it so that you can catch every Pokemon in the game. And I hear you thinking like, what is the difference between having the Pokemons you catch, and every Pokemon is catchable. Well, the difference is every Pokemon that's catchable means that legitimately every Pokemon is catchable. So also trainer Pokemons, which makes it the game even more interesting because you can now go to a gym and fight the gym leader, but instead of fighting him, you can just throw master balls at his Pokemon and then catch his Pokemon and then win the gym. And that's how I played through the whole game when I was a kid, and I fucking loved it. I thought it was so funny because it's just like you can run through this town and then you can no clip as well, so you can just run through forests and make it to towns without fighting anything. Go straight to the gym leader. Don't even have to bother with all the minions that are in the gym itself. Straight to the gym leader. You fight the gym leader. You catch all their Pokemon. You now have great Pokemon that are fantastically leveled. And then you just do that, do that, do that over and over and over again till you reach the end of the game. You fight the Elite Four. You do the same thing, and then you're the Pokemon Master of the Sinnoh region. And it's fucking stupid, and of course it takes away all the fun out of what Pokemon really is. But it is such a fun way to play as a kid because you don't have to do anything and you feel like you're the master. You feel like a real hacker man. So that's one story I would like to tell. And another story I would like to tell is in certain games, when they launch with exploits. And The Witcher 3 had a really big exploit in the game that made it super easy to earn cash. And of course, like I am not an RPG player per se. Nowadays, every game is a little bit of an RPG, but back in the day, like RPGs were very specific, especially fantasy RPGs like Skyrim or like a Witcher game. So for me, it was a completely new experience, and I wanted to make the experience for me, I wanted to say easier. Yes, I guess I wanted to make it just easier for myself, but I didn't want to lower the difficulty because that makes the game itself easier and not necessarily my experience. So I was just like, I'm gonna use one of these exploits. And there was one exploit in the game which was really awesome that makes you be able to buy seashells, then deconstruct them seashells to get pearls, and then you could sell the pearls for a really high amount. So, as an example, you would buy 5 seashells for, I don't know, 20 florins or whatever the fuck the coins are in Witcher. You would deconstruct them, which would cost like, I don't know, 15 florins. And then you would get pearls, which you could sell for 150 and 200, depending on what type of pearl it was. So you made so much fucking money every time you did this, and then you would sleep 3 days or whatever the fuck, and then the one merchant with the seashells would get more seashells, and then you would keep doing that, keep doing that. So I kept doing that because I was just like, I'm just gonna earn some simple money, and then the game is gonna be easier. And the game was easier, and the game became way more fun for me because not only did I have so much money and could just buy everything I wanted, I was also able to level up my gear faster and more efficiently. I was able to get weapons that might not be able to get if I would play normally, and it made the game so much easier and more understandable for me, for somebody that's playing a RPG basically for the first time. That I was just like, well, this is awesome. And again, it's a single player game. It doesn't hurt anybody. But I mean, it hurts the game in a sense that the game isn't built to be running around with thousands of coins in your purse. But you know, it is what it is. But CD Projekt Red, the developer of The Witcher, they found a very interesting way to be a little smug with this because they found the exploit, they took it out of the game, and then in a later update, they added a tax merchant, or I don't know, how do you call that? They added a tax man Let's keep it at that. So later in the game, when you're just walking around, you're gonna get caught by the tax attorney. Is that maybe that's what his name is, the tax attorney? I don't fucking know. And then he asks you a couple of questions, and if you don't answer correctly, he asks you to pay tax, and that would be like a pretty high amount because you cheated the game. And I did it perfectly fine, so I got to keep my cash. But it was a really fun way for CD Projekt Red to say like, "Oh, we kind of fucked up, but it's not that big of a deal because it's a single player game." So going back to the question, after a very long answer, asked by Mega Champs, what is your opinion on cheating on single player games? And my answer would be, it's totally fine. Just make the game as fun as you want. And some of them are actual cheats, some of them are just fun additives, or exploits. But yeah, to me, it's just like, it's a single player game. I don't care what you do with your game if you don't care what I do with mine. So thank you for your question, Mega Champs. And now, moving on to the final question of the Ask Reddit subreddit for today. This one coming from user Stevie-Avail. And they ask, what TV show did you really try hard to get into, but you just couldn't do it? Easy answer for me, it's Game of Thrones. A couple of years ago, I went on holiday to Berlin, and we went by car. So we had to drive quite a couple of hours from Amsterdam to Berlin. So what I did was, and everybody was talking about Game of Thrones at the time. I think they were in their third, maybe even fourth season, and I hadn't seen anything. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get Game of Thrones. I'm gonna put it on my tablet. So I loaded, I believe, 2 seasons of that show on my tablet, and then took it with me to Berlin. And I was watching episodes in the car, and then watching episodes in the hotel. And after watching like a season and a half, maybe even 2 seasons, I was just like, I can't do it. It was, for me, it was way too confusing with all the jumping between all the different families and factions, and I just didn't care enough. So I quickly said, nope, this is not for me. I'm just gonna watch something else because Game of Thrones, not my cup of tea. And I never went back, and I don't regret it one bit because I have many other TV shows to watch, and Game of Thrones is certainly not one of them. So, going back to the question asked by user Stevie-Avail, what TV show did you try really hard to get into, but you just couldn't do it? Game of Thrones. Simple answer. Keeping it nice and short, especially after that very long answer to the previous question. And now we move on to the main event for today, coming from the MIDSL subreddit as always. This one was asked by user Rights Reserver, and they ask, am I the asshole for not wanting my husband's brother to be in the delivery room? I'm currently 31 weeks pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. My husband and I are both 21, and we're trying for a baby for about a year before we fell pregnant. I've had a pretty rough pregnancy, and my brother-in-law is a medical student, so he's taken quite a lot of interest in my pregnancy and future delivery. We have always gotten on well. He's 24. I've known my husband's family since we were children, so we're pretty much grown up together. A few days ago, my husband told me that my brother-in-law had expressed an interest in being there whilst I give birth, mainly due to it being beneficial from an educational standpoint to see a natural multiples birth, which is what I'm planning for. I know things can change on that front, but I'm hoping for that. Also, so my husband can have support as I'll have my mom. Worth mentioning that our hospital doesn't have a restriction on the amount of people who can be in the delivery room. I said absolutely not. There is no way in hell I'm allowing that. I'm not even overly keen on allowing my husband to watch me go through that, let alone his brother. He said it will be good experience for him and his degree, and I said that as much as I support him, my experience of having a pleasant birth was my priority. He got defensive and said he should be allowed to have a support person too, which I suppose I do understand, but I really just feel uncomfortable about it all. He said it was just as much his right as it was mine to have somebody there to support him. It basically turned into an argument with his brother and mom being dragged into it too. Am I the asshole? Rights reserver, thank you for this very elaborate explanation of the situation, because that makes it easy to assess and come to a conclusion. And the conclusion is you're certainly not the asshole. Your husband is the asshole because what the fuck is he doing in the delivery room? You, original poster, are going through something that's for many people horrifying and extremely painful. Giving birth is not as fun as some people think it is. And personally, luckily, I've never gone through it. I was in the hospital when my sister gave birth, and I wasn't in the room because, first off, that's fucking weird. Like, that your brother in law wants to be there for a medical reason, like, I can kinda understand that, but it is fucking weird because the brother in law is just gonna look into your body, basically, and that's fucking weird, dude. And then your husband bitching and moaning that he needs a support system. For what? You're just standing there like a goddamn lemon. Your wife is going through a lot. She has the mother there and the husband. You both are support systems. We don't need support system for support system because if that's the thing, we're gonna just stack and stack and stack and stack, and that's not the point here. The brother in law needs to get the fuck out of the room if he really wants to be at a birth or even a birth of multiples. You can probably put that on fucking Craigslist and or Facebook or something like that and be like, hey, I'm a medical student. I'm very interested in witnessing a multiple birth because that is what I'm going to do or something with his study. And I can guarantee you that there are probably some people that would be like, yeah, it's totally fine. You can come to my birth. I'm giving birth in my bathtub. You can just sit there, whatever. So, original poster, rights reserver, you're totally not the asshole for giving limits to what you are comfortable with and what you want. Because this is a moment about you and the kids. It is not about your husband. It's not about the brother in law. It's about you. It's about you feeling comfortable, you giving birth, and you making sure that you're healthy and your family is healthy. And we don't need a fucking whole circus for you there to look into your vagina. Unless you want that, of course, but it seems that you don't really want that. So, yeah. Rights reserver. Am I the asshole for not wanting my husband's brother to be in the delivery room? No, you're certainly not the asshole. And that was it for me for this week. I hope you had a good time. There were some pretty fun questions in there, and especially the Am I the asshole one at the end was a good one. I will be back next week. In the meantime, you can go back and listen to the older episodes of the Didn't Ask podcast. You can find those on all your favorite podcast services around the globe, but also on anchor.fm/didn't ask pod. Over there, you can also find a button that says message. If you press that, you have the ability to record a voice memo asking your personal question to me, and that will be used in the show if you do. If you don't want your voice to be heard on the show, that's totally fine by me. Just say it up front in your message, and that makes it known to me that you don't want your voice to be heard, and that means that I will read your question out personally myself, so your question can still be answered on the podcast, but your voice won't be heard. If you want to know what I'm watching in the next couple of days, that is totally possible. You should visit Tracked for that. And that link will be in the show description, as always, as well as the previous link that I mentioned. And on Track, you can see all the TV shows, movies, and everything that I'm watching. It's a fun website, and you can keep up with me by following me and adding me as a friend, I believe. Something like that. Well, that was gonna be all for me for this week. Thank you for listening. Please tell your friends, subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Didn't Ask Podcast. You can find that on YouTube as well. That's gonna be all for now. I hope to see you back next week. Have a good week. Goodbye.